just like what interests everybody else. It's just sort of what feels real.
That was totally wicked!
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Real News in the Morning on this Tuesday morning. I'm fairly certain that's what day it is. My name is Mr. Henry. David Shine Thompson over there. We also have our buddy Zig on the line with us as well. Awesome day. Awesome day to be alive here. Awesome day to be a part of the Real News community. Let me jump headlong into this because we got a massive show packed with national stories. We've got a couple local stories I want to get to as well. Let me just start immediately with the greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment. And I don't even mean this to sound hokey in the slightest. I'm actually looking over here to my left when I'm doing that, just so y'all know y'all's right, depending on what the orientation is. This massive screen over here that I'm following the chat and everything else, and I'm looking at some of the stuff that's been happening on our Facebook page, our Real News Facebook page over the last couple of days, over the last about week or so, to give you some context as to about what I'm about to say for the greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment. It's y'all. Y'all are what I'm so appreciative of. Let me explain. David Shine Thompson does this thing, and from time to time, where he'll throw up these live streams, a watch party, sort of, in essence, right? Sometimes it's the President Trump updates. Sometimes it's Tim Pool videos. Over the last week or two, it's been these live streams of some of the protests that have been going on, and a very interesting experiment has been happening during that period. So Shine will throw up all these live streams, and people will end up following our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, under the assumption that I don't know the best way to put this, Shine. Help me figure out the best language.
That we have a certain ideology that might be pro-protester.
There you go.
Or you get what I'm saying? Yeah. That we would at least have a bias towards the protesters, which obviously we do have a bias towards First Amendment and people exercising it however they need to.
But given sort of the divisive nature that's been going on right now, I don't think that when people come to our show, to our channel, that they expect that we live in the world of nuance. We operate in the world in this paradigm where we've always been of genuine, open conversation, communication, of disagreement amongst friends, not enemies, of all this stuff that we preach on this program. I don't think they think to find that. I don't think they really necessarily understand that they've stumbled upon something that leans libertarian, that the hosts consider themselves possibly minarchist at best. Maybe they still vote Republican. It's a weird world that this show operates in, and the spectrum upon which we tackle every single day is something that's slightly difficult to define. Fast forward a little bit. So had these people been coming over, suffice all that to say that we certainly would not be a program you'd come and expect to stream that type of stuff with its entirety. And I don't think they would be necessarily sympathetic to a lot of our causes sometimes, from time to time. Here's the greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment. I've seen some of these people come, and I actually saw a post yesterday. It's a public post, but I don't necessarily think it's important to read the individual's name, but I'm looking at some of it right now where it says something to the effect of like, I'll celebrate 4th of July when there's actually something worth celebrating in this country. Another post that we put up there, something pertaining to a post about Antifa's operations in Nashville. The individual went on to say something to the effect of like, I don't know, I support these youngsters, these young whippersnappers going out there and punching a Nazi. I support what they're doing. And I'll tell y'all right now, dude, the way that y'all have been handling those conversations in the comment section is so beautiful to see. And I'm not exaggerating here, man. I know it sounds like I am. I promise you I'm not. I was reading through this stuff yesterday and honestly got a little bit emotional about it. Because it's everything this community stands for, everything we built from day one, the calm, cordial, open dialogue, the genuine exchange of ideas, the willingness to change your mind if presented with superior factual information. When you have disagreements, to have disagreements amongst friends, not amongst enemies, because we will live next door to each other one day. All that stuff, it's not just rhetoric for this community. It's not just something we say. Dude, y'all have been doing it in the comment section. In particular, our buddy Eric McCain, but all of y'all have been doing this in the comment section. Every single time I see a response to this person, it's just like, yes, dude, yes, we are living this. We're doing it. We're not just saying it to people. So anyways, man, seriously appreciative of what y'all do and seriously thankful for how y'all handle yourselves out there. And just, I appreciate the way that we're doing this stuff with each other, amongst each other. So again, thank you. I appreciate it. When that happens, by the way, if occasionally someone comes and stumbles upon this channel, I think you'll actually start to see in some of the responses, it's like you can actually see the verbalization of the cognitive dissonance, right? You can see them typing out like, I don't understand what's going on out here. I've just been programmed to disagree with everything I see on my screen, but these people are really inclusive. They're really accepting, and they kind of want to know my opinion on everything, and I just don't get it. But you keep doing that for a little while more, and I promise you, man, I promise you we're going to have some awesome stuff. Updates real quick on some state stuff going on. We got a bunch of stuff across the board. You have some local stories in here. What I want to give updates to, though, is some stuff that we were made aware of yesterday as far as the Americans for Prosperity front. Man, we're getting major wins across the board. Major wins. I'm talking criminal justice reform wins. Quick story here. Currently in the state of Tennessee, if you were caught with drugs of any kind, shape, size, doesn't matter, within 1,000 feet of a drugs-free zone, whether that's a school or a public park, it's a mandatory minimum of 15 years. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if the school is shut down. We heard a story about a school that had been shut down for 7 months due to black mold. Someone was caught while driving through there with a very small amount of marijuana, 15 years mandatory minimum. We had a judge come into committee and tell this story about how there was a guy who had an arrest warrant. His roommate had an arrest warrant. So they came into the house, arrested his roommate, and then arrested him as well just because he so happened to be there, or at least detained the individual. Now, there's a thing called a search incident to arrest, meaning that they patted this guy down because they had detained him at the time. While they were patting him down, they found a very small amount of cocaine. The judge said it was about the size of a pinky fingernail. He was 972 feet from a public school. He was self-medicating. He wasn't selling to children, man. But this guy, 15 years mandatory minimum. Now, after that sentence was handed down, the judge went back to his jury room and said, importantly, in Tennessee, you cannot instruct jury members as to the sentence that something carries. That's for the judge to do. You can only tell them what the charge is. And then you can tell them the legal elements, whether they're guilty or not guilty. But you cannot tell them if you convict them, they're going to be serving 15 years. Now, after the fact, the judge went back in the room and asked the jury members, if you would have known that this guy would have been serving 15 years minimum for a violation like that, would you still have voted the same way? And he said that one of the jury members actually ended up, crying, breaking down, asking the judge, did I seriously just commit this guy to 15 years? 15 years in jail. The judge said, yeah, unfortunately, my hands are tied here. We have a bill that does something for that. By we, I mean it's a bill that Representative Curcio is carrying. But Americans for Prosperity did a lot of work up there in the legislature lobbying on behalf of that bill. What it does is it puts the power back in the judge's hand. It gives the judge discretion to make a call as to whether or not that should be warranted or not. We have a bill on victim restitution, making sure our victims get paid first before the court costs. In Tennessee, a lot of the times the court clerks will say, you're going to pay your court costs first before we make the victim whole. We don't like that. That moved through committee. Our drug-free school zone bill moved through committee. House Bill 862, that's Representative Lafferty's bill. That's the civil asset forfeiture bill I've been telling you about. That's up for committee process again here, I want to say on Wednesday of this week. Maybe it's today. I'll check again here in a second. Links in the show notes for that. Lastly, telemedicine is a major thing we're working on. We're getting awesome wins with our criminal justice reform stuff. Telemedicine is one that we're trying to keep going on right now. During this COVID shutdown period, obviously, Governor Bill Lee extended or rather released some restrictions on telemedicine. Telemedicine is clearly exactly what it sounds like. You can meet with your doctor, not having to be in the same physical space as them. A huge opportunity opens to all kind of rural healthcare, fill in the blanks. That is in jeopardy necessarily of being shut back down again once those restrictions are put back in place. We would like to see those restrictions removed forever. There's a petition you can sign at the links in the show notes there. It says keep telemedicine in Tennessee. But let me tell you the real reason why I'm asking for this appeal right now. David and I are making calls actively daily to survey other Tennesseans about how they feel about telemedicine. In particular, there's one Senate district that we are trying to target. For when and if this actually comes to the Senate floor, we are trying to target a particular individual to make sure he knows that our voices are heard. If for some reason you would like to take place in that, like to take part, help us out in that effort, direct message myself, David, or the Renalist channel. We'll get you all the information you need. We would absolutely love your help.
And that's for today. If you want to help us today, we need help today. You just send us a direct message either to us personally or to the Real News page, and we will talk to you after the show.
Absolutely. And if you want to help with anything else like that that's not linked to the show notes, let us know.
Freedom of choice.
Say it again.
I said freedom of choice. Like people deserve. Yeah, people deserve to be able to have that kind of relationship with their doctor if them and their doctor agree to that kind of relationship. Being able to do stuff over the phone. That's freedom.
I thought you said wheel of choice at first, which it is. Like, you know, anything we're working on, the wheel of choice to spin the wheel. If you want to be CGR,
keeps on turning.
If you want to be telemedicine, whatever. Hey, Sean, let's bring in our audience. Our guest members for today. Zig, buddy, Sean's bringing him in on the program here. Zig is our buddy with AFP up there in the Pennsylvania area. How are you doing this morning, Zig? Everything good your way?
Everything's all right, my friends. We're working on the same telemedicine issues that you guys are having right there. So yeah, just to introduce myself, my name's Sigmund, Master of Philosophy, thinking about things thoughtfully, like telemedicine.
Yeah. Hey, and we should call Tuesday. This is Thoughtful Tuesdays. What do you think? What do you think, Grant? Thoughtful Tuesdays with
Thoughtful
Sigmund.
Tuesdays. Yes, sir.
That's right.
Hey, speaking in the realm of healthcare policy a little bit, Shine, if you want to, I'm going to skip past the rest of the local stories here, man. We have just so many national stories that we need to get to here already. Go to the first part of that national stories, and being that it is Thoughtful Tuesday, being that we have a guy like Zig here who can help us break this down, parse some of this out much better than I think I could. Shine, right there where it says COVID-19 updates, the double speak from healthcare experts. I'm hoping that link works. If not, I can try and share it on mine, but it's a link to my Google Photos, and I'm sure you've been seeing the same thing go around. Yeah, go ahead and click on that photo there. No, yeah, go ahead and throw that on the screen. Zig, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this on your screen. Let me just read to you what's been going around. It's what they're looking at right now is a screenshot. This is in the relation to sort of double speak from healthcare experts that's happening right now. It's a screenshot from Fox News, and it says at the top, the banner says, health experts support anti-police protests. Now, here's the quote. And this is a difficult time that we're living in, Zig. I'm trying to figure out what the double speak behind this is, but here's the quote. As public health advocates, we do not condemn these gatherings as risky for COVID-19 transmission. This should not be confused with a permissive stance on all gatherings, particularly protest against stay-at-home orders. So I don't know what to do with that, Sig, but I think that's where we're at right now, is the health experts are essentially saying if you're protesting against the stay-at-home orders, that's not okay because you could likely spread COVID-19 that way. If you are protesting against, say, police brutality, that is okay, I suppose, because you will not be spreading COVID-19. And if you don't follow that logic, then I suppose what they're really saying is that both will actually spread COVID-19. It's just one is more justified than the other because one has more weight behind it than the other. You get what I'm saying?
Well, I think if you do think and break this down, one justification that you could make in their favor that they didn't articulate is that for folks who are very concerned with what's going on with policing, it might be a good opportunity to help their mental health, right? So therefore, it might serve as a conducive and productive outlet for some of these people to get the weight off their shoulders. Now, my issue is that if you're going to protest, is that going to lead to a substantial policy change? No, probably not. But I guess if you're getting out there for purposes of your mental health, which in some cities there has been a spike in violence after this policing issue, that actually might be cathartic and therapeutic, right?
And Daniel says here in Facebook, an interesting point to bring up. Daniel says it's because it's a bigger issue than COVID-19. Also, most of the protesters about policing are wearing masks. Yeah, I guess I understand that. Except the other story that we have today is from the WHO. I mean, apparently now the WHO is saying that you should wear masks, but they're also now saying too that you cannot, that spreading asymptomatically is not necessarily a problem. More on that in a second. Kelly said nobody should go to jail for possession of small amounts of drugs ever. They're still trying to get rid of religious exemptions for vaccines as well. I think that was on the previous story. Now Daniel's point here brings up a very interesting side of this. It's because it's a bigger issue than COVID-19. Now, frankly, and I know I'm probably going to be in the minority when I say something like this, I actually understand that. Now, I partially even empathize with what Daniel is saying here. And by that, I mean, if you can somehow force yourself to live in this world where everything is not black and white, I think the basic pitch should go something like, okay, look, we're aware that COVID-19 is still a thing. We're aware that it's likely that we're still going to be spreading some of this stuff around. Nevertheless, though, somebody was just killed by a police officer, and we've been waiting for a particular period of time where we need to express our opinions on that. And if we do not express our opinions on that right now, we are fearful of what's going to happen again. We're fearful not just of more lives being lost by police, but also the continued sort of police presence and authority that may sort of just live on into, I don't know, not eternity, but at least the next couple of years for sure. The point being is that, yes, COVID-19 might still spread, but in the larger comparison of what's actually more important right now as far as COVID-19 or tackling this issue is actually more important than COVID-19 stuff. Now that I can get behind in some sense. Hear me out here. I can get behind it if everyone was initially on that same page. If everyone was initially on that same page that we're restricting civil liberties to some extent is a worthy thing to pursue during a shutdown period, because we heard the exact opposite. Now, I think Dana would follow me with this. We heard the exact opposite just a few months ago. Now, granted, that seems to be conflated with this idea that people were just protesting to get haircuts, which I think is nonsensical. You're talking about a full shutdown of the economy. You're talking about businesses going out of businesses. You're talking about furloughing tens of millions of employees. For what we told was the medical consensus, the scientific consensus on this thing. We were told that there was TikTok videos of hospital workers that were dancing all around saying, like, we appreciate you staying home so that we can save lives. If you stay home, you save lives. There was this weird sense of guilt placed upon everybody that if you go out and try to make a living for your family, you are endangering another individual. That's where I think Daniel is, and what I'm saying is that it's missed. We've missed that opportunity. This is why I said a while ago, I'm hoping we can take partisan out of this entirely, partisan politics out of this entirely. No more Democrat, Republican on this at all. Just let the medical experts speak on this. But unfortunately, it seems like the medical experts now have I don't know, man. I don't know.
Their bias is showing. Their bias is showing. And if we know they're biased, then we can't trust their opinions, right? They've shot themselves in the foot. They're no longer experts. They're just like me and you and everybody else. They have a partisan opinion that affects their presentation of knowledge.
Well, it's not just that. They also have certain institutional incentives to agree with and validate whatever they think the majority opinion is. Okay, so it's actually quite interesting to think that you could ever have a medical expert in some kind of administration, because at that point they go from being a medical expert to somebody who is expected to shape or influence or deal with or manage public opinion, which at that point the medical expertise has nothing to do with any of those political realities that they're facing, right?
And Daniel just said a second ago that expert scientists will disagree. That's how science works. Of course, sure, certainly about the science, but we're not talking about science right now. There is no scientific consensus on it.
There's no science that says it's okay for BLM protesters and safer for them and not safer for people to go to church. There's no science that says that. That's the point.
And that's what I'm saying is if the scientific experts in the medical community were to come out and just straight out say, look, it's likely that this stuff is still being spread. We just think it's justifiable because what they're marching for is arguably more important than the spread of COVID-19 right now. I think that is the only way, not just to remain consistent, but to be honest in the medical community. That's the only way to be honest about what's actually going on. Either that or admit that it was never a problem to begin with. I mean, it doesn't matter necessarily. You just have to go one of those two ways with it. You have to admit that it was a never problem to begin with, or that it is still a problem, but in spite of that problem, it's okay because it's justifiable to make sure that the proper attention is brought to this issue.
And also, though, on the other hand, though, just imagine, though, healthcare experts telling those people to stay home after the police had done what they had done. What are they going to do to get people to stay home? Bring in more police? Think about how that would actually work out politically. That wouldn't work out at all. In fact, that would cause more chaos. So although the justification might be faulty, the intended outcome that they want, which they might get, might be sensible, right?
And you just hit it on the head there of might be sensible here. I think all I'm saying is, like, it does not seem like there's a sensible approach that we've been coming to right now. There's a New York Daily News headline that I'm looking at right now. Shine just sent me this off air, saying Manhattan DA will not prosecute protesters amid mass New York City arrests. Commends New Yorkers exercising civil rights at George Floyd demonstrations. Again,
The article goes on to say that if you're a certain kind of protester with a certain kind of ideology, you will be let go. You won't be prosecuted. But I think it was just 2 weeks ago, there were a large group of Jewish people who were prosecuted in the city of New York for having a religious gathering. What I'm starting to worry about, Grant, is it's not just the medical experts that are not using their craft in order to be experts. They're using their political opinions to be experts. And it's not just medical people. Now it's legal people. Now it's the prosecutor in New York is saying a certain ideology, it's okay for them to do stuff, and it's not okay for other people to do stuff. And that's really weird. Like, they're elevating one ideology over to the exclusion of all others. I don't even want to say against one specific other. And it's not consistent, and it's weird because it's not, you're only safe to protest if you have a certain ideology, and you're also only safe from not being arrested if you have a certain ideology. And that's a little bit weird.
No, I know. And honestly, man, like the show that we did on Friday, whatever, maybe we just do need to recognize that we're in a Huxley world right now. Like, hypocrisy is not a thing anymore. It's just not a thing that people care about anymore. Let me prove it to this point, Shine. Okay, so in the show notes there, national stories, skip past that one that says asymptomatic spread, Shine. Skip past that one that says Governor Tom Wolf. See that next red headline there where it says it was supposed to be satire? This is a story comparison that I got from Tim Pool. Okay. And this is what I'm saying, y'all. Like, I think I just need to get my head around the idea now that there is no such thing as hypocrisy, or at least not in the traditional sense that we recognize it. And you feel some sense of shame for it. You feel some sense of, I don't know, man, intellectual belittling, that you should do better, that we should be better, that we should have or at least strive towards some sense of intellectual consistency across the board so that stuff makes sense. I just don't think we're there, and I don't think people care. Here's a Babylon Bee headline, okay? And I'm telling y'all, when Babylon Bee is more accurate than real life, or at least as accurate as real life, we probably have a problem. Here's this Babylon Bee headline. It was supposed clever churchgoers avoid arrest by disguising themselves as rioters. Again, this is supposed to be satire. It's not supposed to be real. It's meant to be funny. I stress that one more time because there are a few people that may not know what Babylon Bee is. I know that sounds ridiculous, but we've had them on Real News before. They thought we were promoting something real and whatever. Religious people in Southern California have found a bold, creative solution for in-person meetings in spite of continuing lockdown. This past weekend, several area churches attended church services disguised as righteously indignant rioters. This is a quote coming from one church elder, said, we already have the righteous indignation thing down. Now we simply added, hoodies and Guy Fawkes masks and baseball bats and yada, yada. And the story goes on from there. Leaders from the Spirit River City Church in LA County are reporting a successful Sunday service after using this method. So that you get the joke, okay? Everyone understands the joke.
It's so funny. They even say towards the end that they had to have like at least 3 or 4 people continue fighting the entire time in order for them to have their church services. But so we all understand that this is a joke, or at least it was meant to be satire. But Shine, pull up the next story here from the Washington Times. And this is the point of what I'm trying to prove, okay? In a world where there is no consistency, in the world where nobody cares about hypocrisy, do not be surprised when people take advantage of that situation. And do not be surprised when people get confused as to what actually should and should not be. That is my real concern with all this, is we lose a sense of objectivism. I don't know what the end goal is anymore. Here's the next headline, and this is a real story. The last story from Babylon Bee was satire. This one actually happened, and then I'm going to kick it to Zig here for some response. Speedway declares race a protest to skirt coronavirus rules, draws 2,000 people. A North Carolina Speedway drew a crowd of more than 2,000 spectators, quote, in defiance of the state's coronavirus restrictions after declaring the race a protest. Quick pause. Tim Pool picked up on this. In a world where there is no objectivism, how are you going to be able to say that it was in defiance of the state's coronavirus restrictions? Because in North Carolina, those coronavirus restrictions do not apply to certain protesters. So if you then are going to claim that you were protesting the same thing as other protesters, it's a subjective component for me to say, no, you're not being truthful. You're not being right. Well, who is truthful? What is hypocrisy? What is the objective real of what you're actually protesting for or not? Now, I'm sure someone could say, yes, Grant, clearly they're not protesting this stuff at a speedway. And you're probably correct. But does that matter?
I mean, does it really matter in a world where hypocrisy doesn't matter? Continue on, the governor's office had warned that Ace Speedway in Ellen earlier this week that a crowd of more than 25 people would violate the state's phase 2 coronavirus restrictions. But news outlets reported that more than 2,000 attended a race on Saturday night. Aside from management outside the Speedway said, this event is held in a peaceful protest of injustice and inequality everywhere. And I guarantee you, man, if they would have done some demonstration during, I don't know, before the race started or after the race concluded or something, maybe it actually would have been. And maybe it actually was. I wasn't there. I don't pretend to know. But again, my point is, if this story upsets you, then you have to see where I'm coming from. It's the inconsistency that is driving me insane. It's the inconsistency that I can't get my head around because I can't figure out the end goal. And I can't necessarily figure out, like, okay, so how does this all not entirely refute the need for mail-in ballots now? I mean, if all this stuff eventually has been working towards Democrats' need for mail-in ballots because of the massive risk of coronavirus spreading everywhere, dude, did Democrats just not shoot that in their foot entirely? Am I off here, man? I'm going to kick the zig for a minute, but you have to hear where I'm coming from. In a world where there's no hypocrisy, no consistency, and there's no such thing as an objective reality, if the objective reality was once that we need mail-in ballots because of the risk of this virus, well, do we really? Do we really? Because how much of a risk is there, seriously? And to what extent do we risk civil liberties to say that risk is no longer worthy? Zig, Shine, whoever, man. I was spewing there for a minute. Sorry about that, buddy.
No, I think, this is the point that I made yesterday in my community conversation, was that there's a surface level politics that gets people caught up in hypocrisy traps and smoke screens. And so it's not to be logically consistent. It is to frustrate people like you, Grant, to stop you from actually taking real meaningful action, because the longer that you worry about all these hypocritical statements and all these ridiculous things being said, that's less time that you're going to actually be thinking about a constructive solution, right? And that's going to stop you from organizing different groups against these things. And that's what happens to a lot of good people. It happens to one of my best activists. Is he sends me all these very extreme stories, and it's like, buddy, I'm not interested in this because I'm trying to help fix our state right now. Like, you need to get out of this being baited into various hypocrisy traps that are actually counterproductive in the long term. That's what I think is going on. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense. And it's also a little bit convicting too, right? As I think it should be. I mean, as I'm sitting here trying to make sense of this entire thing and trying to make sense of left to right, and I'm trying to make sense of, I'm calling for objective stance on all this. And I think what you're saying is like the true objective stance to all this probably should be stop worrying about it. Stop messing with it. It truly is. Honestly, man, we come on this show and preach all the time, Zig, about like what I'm now doing. And I think what Zig is saying, and I'm catching myself doing it right now. I'm paying attention to that 5% squeaky wheel, right? I'm trying to oil that squeaky wheel, maybe because it's yelling at me the loudest, and it's frustrating me because it's hitting me at my core. It's also coupled with this idea of like we've been in this world. AFP has been in this world. I've been in this world. Shine's been in this world. Zig has been in this world for fighting for criminal justice reform, for fighting for the right thing for a very, very long time. And I just don't want to see it all go up in smoke to this issue of stuff that just doesn't make sense, to this world of hypocrisy, to this world of a lack of objective stance on any of this. And I think what Zig is saying is like, just don't worry about all that then, man. Just don't worry about all that. Start focusing more on the things that are actually going to implement and enact change, not just at the ground level, but I think that's where a lot of people want. A lot of people just want to be done with this. And talking about it more may not be the way to be done with it, man. I don't know.
I have a little bit of a different take, even though I very much appreciate what Zig is saying, because I don't think you ever need to get like emotionally wrapped up in this stuff where it starts affecting your personal mental health and things like that. I really agree with that, because I don't know, Grant, I'll be a little vulnerable here. I have, in my 12 years of covering news every single day or whatever, had times where I got a little too emotionally wrapped up. But I feel like Professor Wordsworth in that episode of The Twilight Zone. If anyone's ever, that's a terrible reference probably, because who's watched The Twilight Zone? But I have. But Mr. Wordsworth is being told that reality is whatever the authorities say it is. And he's saying, and Mr. Wordsworth makes the point that truth is truth and that he matters because he exists. And I feel like people are telling a story where I'm not allowed to exist. Or, and it's a weird thing to say, and maybe that's not even the right words to use, but I feel the best way I can say is I feel like Mr. Wordsworth in the Twilight Zone. And I do feel like sometimes I read the news and it's Twilight Zone stuff where, like, it's okay to protest, it's not okay to go to church, or it's okay to protest for a certain thing. You're like, it's not just protests are okay. It's only okay to protest for a certain thing, and it's not okay for a bunch of people to go to a racetrack and exercise personal responsibility, like they're responsible for if they get sick or not. The government is not. That's crazy to think that the government would be responsible for these people. They're responsible. They're adults. We're treating everyone like children. It's very weird. And no, I'm not getting emotionally wrapped up in it. I'm able to do this show with you, Grant, and have these conversations, be vulnerable, and talk about things that make me feel uncomfortable or whatever. And then I'm able to go have a regular day after this, you know. So I encourage, there's a balance there, but I really appreciate what Zig said. This is not a counterpoint to what Zig said. I'm just sharing my feelings, so to speak.
No, and I am actually affirming your point. I am affirming the fact that you feel that way. And what I'm saying is instead of just feeling that way, you can feel that way and take action. Create your own thing. Make your own logically consistent news. Hang out with your own people. You don't have to be upset because these people aren't agreeing with you. Go out and make something else. That's an opportunity that we're all so grateful. We should all be so grateful to have each day. We don't have to get caught up in this. We can make anything that we want any day. And that's freedom.
Adam just said in Facebook, constructive solutions. Yeah. Constructive solutions. Right? I mean, it's one thing to be able to talk about it, but actually implementing and changing constructive solutions that construct a better reality going forward. Matt said they're trying to write us out of history. I think that's what Shine was talking about a little bit too, right? The inability to voice your opinion on something. And frustratingly enough, the only opportunity that you have to voice your opinion on something is just sort of arguing in the wind. Right? The proverbial immovable object meeting the unstoppable force. That's a little bit of what it feels like.
Well, let me say too, the us is not anything but anything that's excluded from the group. The us is there's like one ideology, one thing that's important, and that's the only thing that's important. So when you say us, it's everybody that's not included in that group that's been told that they're okay to be the people who are alive. No one else is allowed to be alive. No one else is allowed to have opinions except a very small group of people with a certain ideology. And that's who the us is. I don't want people to think, you get what I mean, Grant. I just wanted to define us. Definitely. We. Just everyone who's not allowed to speak. That's who I'm talking about when I say us.
Matt just said, build your own pyramids. There's a lot of beautiful imagery in that of building your own pyramids. I mean, if you just think about the understanding of, like, you know, you have the opportunity right now to make order out of chaos every single day, that you have the opportunity right now every single day that you wake up to, I don't know, focus on the idea of how can you make something better, not just for yourself, but for your community, for your loved ones, for your neighbors, for your brothers and sisters. And I think it is our calling on this earth, whether you want to call it spiritual, otherwise doesn't necessarily matter. But I think it is our calling on this earth to make order out of this chaos in a beautiful way. Amy said that there's there's hypocrisy, but the people who are hypocrites just don't care. That's a funny way to put it. That's true. She said, no, there is hypocrisy. It's just the people that are hypocrites just don't care. And I think another small thing that's adding to some of this is, if I can bring Amy up as an example here. Amy, by the way, is, like I said before, is one of the best people to know in the Middle Tennessee area. She's an attorney here, Vanderbilt Law grad, knows what she's doing. She's also one of the best activists out here in the area for every single organization possible. Naming an organization, she's probably done something with them. And she was actually at this event that AFP was at last Saturday, and I remember her saying something to the effect of, like, man, it's just so nice to be around people again. It's just so nice to see other human beings again. And I think Zig, in some small sense, that's a little bit of what's hitting people right now. Is, I mean, if it is true that 40, let's call it 50% of human communication is nonverbal, my cadence of voice, my mannerisms that I like to use all the time, the tone that I deliver speech patterns with, all this stuff. If 40 to 50% of human communication is nonverbal, if I'm always communicating through a screen with somebody else, dude, I'm basically interacting with half a human being all the time. And very frustrating for some people that this shutdown thing, man, it drives you into a realm where you can only focus on the squeaky wheels. And what you really need is some human interaction again, to know that like there are other like-minded people that don't want to focus on those squeaky wheels, that are as frustrated by that as you are. And I think that's a small component of what adds in is when Amy says, like, man, it's just so nice to be around other people again, to experience this, to know what's going on, to, I don't know, live life with each other. That's what it's all about. And maybe this story here will have something, I don't know, positive to say about some possibility for that. CNBC headline there, shining into the national stories, and then I'll get off the COVID stuff, I promise. Asymptomatic spread of coronavirus is very rare, the WHO says. Now, I don't know if this is going to help you or not, but because it might add to the confusion that we've just spoke about a second ago. It might add to the idea that, I don't know, man, maybe there's a way we can get to some type of, I don't know, herd immunity sooner rather than later. Here's the story. Coronavirus patients without symptoms are not driving the spread of the virus. This is what the WHO said. Again, keep in mind, WHO is the World Health Organization. I don't need to explain that any further, but the WHO is the WHO. So just keep that in mind. This is casting doubts on concerns by some researchers that the disease could be difficult to contain due to asymptomatic infections. Now, this is coming from Dr. Maria von Kerkhove. Oh my gosh, I butchered that. I apologize. Whatever. She's the head of the WHO's Emerging Diseases Unit, and said that the news briefing from the United Nations agency's headquarters, she said the following: from the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onwards to a secondary individual. It's very rare. Government responses should focus on detecting and isolating infected people with symptoms and, quote, tracking anyone who might have come into contact with them. She acknowledged that some studies have indicated that asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic spread in nursing homes and in household settings. So there you go, man. Make of that what you will. I don't know what you want to do with it. But apparently now the WHO is saying that asymptomatic spreads is not nearly as problematic as we once thought. So I don't know, man. Maybe Oak Ridge can have that fireworks display this year, or maybe they can't. I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of it as best as you can, but I do think, Zig, you hit a good point there, man, of basically just focus on the things that are within your control right now. Stop worrying about the other stuff.
Well, and I think the crisis we're in highlights the need to do so, because so many people initially got focused on a national news media that doesn't seem to have been totally accurate. Instead, if people would have just disregarded them and said, hey, this doesn't make any sense, and did something else constructive, like talk to their lawmaker, talk to small business people in the area. If they would have done that instead of following this paranoia agent, then we could have lived healthier lives. The economy could have improved sooner. We wouldn't have states begging for money because the economy would be open. But instead, people chose the hysterical option.
And let me switch topics here. Again, realnewsradio.live, realnewsradio.live. That's where we're going to be able to find all the links to, goodness gracious, everything we have going on right now. Be able to find links to Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. You're going to be able to find links to the new one we have, Mixer. I got all kind of stuff there. A little bit of, Real News swag if you want to get a mug or a backpack or whatever else, a book bag, whatever. Realnewsradio.live. Check all that stuff out. Zig, you just brought this up, though, and I think it's fantastic. If you would have just spoken to your legislator, you can call these people. That's one of the things David and I are asking people to do when it pertains to telemedicine today, is we're going to be calling other people in Tennessee, asking them. By the way, in a couple days from now, we've got a new initiative going on. We're going to be contacting these people directly. Would you be willing to contact these people directly and just have a quick phone call and say, hey, by the way, telemedicine, we like it. Please keep it around. Click. I'm your constituent. Click. I would like you to vote this way because you're up for re-election. Click, right? Like I want to let you know, I want my voice to be heard. It can be done. Conversely, I think it would do a major amount, an awesome opportunity for legislators to speak to their constituents also. I say that, Shine, under the defund police section here. That's the switch of topic that we're going into right now. Remember last Thursday or last Friday, I had this whole spiel specifically dedicated to just y'all, okay? If we don't take a beat and pause for a minute, I caution my friends, especially my white liberal friends, for being too zealous during a time period such as this. Because some of these posts, some of these well-intentioned posts, or some of these well-intentioned performance pieces can actually come off as severely condescending. Shine, pull up that first video there. It's a Facebook video. And if you can do me a favor, go to the 2-minute mark first, or at least around the 2-minute mark first. I want to give everyone an indication as to what happened yesterday that House Democrats did, specifically led by Pelosi. And this is a little bit of what I'm talking about in what Zig just brought up. Go to your legislator, speak to your legislator. Conversely, legislators, start at 2 minutes there. Yeah. Conversely, legislators, speak to your constituents. I don't know, if you have an idea of like something like this that we're about to play here in a second, maybe talk to somebody in the community first. Maybe talk to somebody from Africa first and figure out if the scarf that you're about to use may have some type of connotations you don't want to, offend with, or some implication that you want to go. Go ahead and play that video from 2 minutes, and then I'll go back and give you the response. Play that real quick, Sean.
For our moment of silence.
All right, so you can pause that there, Sean. Now, go back to the very beginning of the video. Okay. Now, some people that just watch that may think to themselves, there's nothing inherently offensive about that. What are you talking about? They were just like, it was a nice moment of solidarity. They're trying to promote unity. They were trying to understand that the two cultures melding, America's a melting pot, all that stuff. The imagery is there. Okay. It makes sense. Well, sort of. I mean, possibly. But I don't know, man. I don't presume to understand what these scarves mean or do not mean. This is what I'm saying, y'all. Okay. Virtue signaling has become a thing where it's almost a tradable commodity in a sense. Right? Like the more you do it, it almost translates or converts into political capital. Like you can almost, I don't want to go too far with this analogy, but you get what I'm saying, okay? You can almost trade it into political capital of what just happened. Now play this from the very beginning, Sean, because an African woman actually responds to what happened yesterday. Just go ahead and play that.
Kneel for our moment of silence.
I was just looking online today, like most of you, and what did I see? A bunch of Democrat politicians kneeling down, of which I have nothing to say about that because I am not an American. However, they were all having around their necks this colorful fabric, which I'm sure they put around their necks as some kind of mark or show of unity or solidarity with Black people. So in other words, they are putting forward the kente material or this colorful fabric they had around their necks as some kind of placating sign or symbol to show that they are not racist and they are together with Black people. Excuse me, dear Democrats, in your tokenism, you didn't wait to find out that this thing that you're hanging around your neck is not just some African uniform. It's actually the kente material. The kente belongs to the Ghanaian people, mainly the Ashanti tribe. Excuse me, Democrats, don't treat Africans like we're children. These fabrics and these, colorful things that we have within our culture and tradition, they all mean something to us. I know you look at us and you say, oh, Africans, you're so cute in all your colorful dresses. Well, some of those dresses and patterns and colors and fabrics actually do mean something to us. Some of them belong to ancient tribes and mean something to them. So why are you using it as your own show of non-racism or your own show of virtue? Why are you using the kente material to signal your virtue? Stop it. We are not children. Africans are not children. And leave our tradition and our culture to us. And if you don't know much about it, ask somebody. I'm sure there would have been something else you could have done to show your solidarity with Black people, instead of taking the kente material and making a little show of it.
For those who wish.
I'm telling you, man. Zig, I want to kick it to you for some response too. I don't know. You couldn't see probably was being played, but you at least got the audio of that. If you don't know something about something, just ask somebody about it, man. Just ask somebody about it. I don't know if that's going to your point or not. Maybe I took it off on too far of a tangent, man. But I think in general, all we're really talking about is just like, dude, if you have a lack of knowledge on something, just seek a little bit more knowledge. This should be a time of growth and progression and learning, as opposed to just like, I don't know, hitting it first. I don't know, buddy. Go ahead, though.
Well, and I also think to some degree we ought to question the value of quote unquote solidarity. I mean, if you are in U.S. Congress, how can you ever show solidarity? You are in a position of power. You can't show unity with people because you are by definition in a higher position of power, and perhaps you shouldn't. Perhaps as an elected official, you should think about things thoughtfully, which is why you presumably ran for the position, and presumably that's why you're getting paid. So instead of making these fake and ridiculous shows of virtue, why not think about things thoughtfully and unite your community through thought instead of all these weird symbolic actions? Makes no sense to me.
We're in a time right now, man, where I think this entire movement started, or at least what I found that it started basically on the idea of like, it's just, dude, it's all just become too dehumanizing. Okay, it's all just become too dehumanizing. And I honestly don't know where you go from here, because as far as like it pertains to presidential candidates, let me hit some of the comments for a second, then I'll switch this topic. Matt just said, Kelly said, no, she's such a worm. Matt said, if a clown world hasn't sharpened your thinking and revealed what's important, I'm sorry. Okay, that's the best way to put it. Honestly, bro, I mean, I don't know, man. That's a little bit of what Zig was talking about before. We're living in a clown world, okay? So just call the clowns out for what they are. Just recognize them by the shoes. If they're oversized, you got a clown, right?
You don't have
just
to
recognize the clown world. Say it again, Zig.
Has to be a part of the circus, you see?
Yes, yeah. I don't want to live in a circus, man. It's not what I trained for. That's right, dude. Kelly says, everything about this is offensive. Matt said Justin Trudeau playing dress up. Amy went on to say, also, it's stupid to use African symbols to show injury with Black Americans. That's an interesting point for sure. Here's what I was saying a second ago, though. There's a new NPR headline that came out. And this all yesterday was revolving around the idea of sort of, defunding or disbanding police. And I said yesterday, and I'm going to stick to this until someone disproves me, man. If Democrats start pitching this idea of disbanding and defunding police, coupled with a lack of support for the Second Amendment, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what you're saying. It cannot be. Now, if the idea is to do much more funding into mental health issues, yeah, let's talk about that. If the idea is that we don't need to militarize police, sure. Thomas Massey and Justin Amash have been talking about that for years. Rand Paul wrote an article all the way back in 2014. Ron Paul brought that up. In a libertarian sense, yes, let's demilitarize police. In Nashville alone, I think a lot of people know this. This was brought to my attention over the weekend. In Nashville, we actually opted on to a government program where we pay them a yearly stipend to be allowed to have decommissioned military vehicles come in to our police force. So in Nashville, we have 2 previously allotted military helicopters that are supposed to be used for riot control that were never used for anything. Why are we paying for that? Even if you want to talk about the militarization, because it doesn't matter. At least get your head around the idea of the the finances behind it or something. Nashville's paying for a bunch of military vehicles that they're just straight not using. Nevertheless, back to the point. When we're talking about defunding the police or disbanding the police, if Democrats bring that up, or if the Black Lives Matter bring it up right now, or whatever this movement is that's bringing it up right now, it doesn't matter. If you, in conjunction with, oh, by the way, we also do not support the Second Amendment, I don't know how you fill in that power vacuum. A void will inevitably be created there. And what's your solution for filling that in then? As I've said before, I appreciate that Second Amendment. That's where I would like to go with this. Privatization is not a problem for me, but it does seem to be a problem for the other side. I don't think you can just generally pitch a utopia and then just cross your fingers and hope. With that being said, here's the NPR headline. Biden opposes defunding police, campaign says. Vice President Biden does not believe, this is coming from a Biden campaign spokesperson, Andrew Bates. They told this to NPR. Vice President Biden does not believe that police should be defunded. He hears and shares the deep grief and frustration of those calling out for change and is driven to ensure that justice is done and that we put a stop to this terrible pain. Now, it's a weird world we're living in, man. It's a weird world. Because I don't think Trump supports defunding police either. Neither does just Joe Biden support defunding police. So now you have a little bit of a complex going on right now. And as we saw yesterday, when I played that clip from Mayor Jacob Fry in Minneapolis, he actually said he as well does not support defunding the police. And as far as it pertains specifically to Black Lives Matter, he was marched out of that crowd. He no longer has the support of this movement, or so the movement has told me. So if I'm to use that as some type of comparison, or if I'm to use that as some type of, pattern going forward, I would presume then that Joe Biden now also no longer has the support of the protesters. Instead, the campaign is touting a, quote, criminal justice plan that includes a $300 million investment into community policing initiatives, plus efforts to diversify police forces and fund more body cameras. Now, again, here's where we have the problem. If you're a libertarian like myself, man, or if you're someone out there that's trying to figure out where you fit in between the parties, I don't know what you do anymore. Because on the one hand, if you don't necessarily like the invocation of the Insurrection Act, which I don't necessarily appreciate, I explained that last week, doesn't necessarily matter, well, then you could have some knocks against Trump. On the other hand, let's be for real. Joe Biden was essentially the architect of a lot of the criminal justice problems that we currently have. He was essentially the architect, at least of the full-on implementation of civil asset forfeiture. He kind of touts this stuff as a good thing. And to be fair, let's be for real here, okay? This is me being a little bit partisan. To be fair, President Trump has a far better record when it comes to criminal justice reform issues, at least in comparison with Biden. Now, I know that sounds awkward at first, especially in light of what's currently going on. But does anyone remember the First Step Act? The First Step Act is essentially something that previous Democrat presidents, Obama primarily, had been trying to pass for 8 years. The First Step Act is exactly what it sounds like. It takes and it's a comprehensive approach and says there's a lot of people that are sitting in jail that probably shouldn't be sitting in jail. How do we take a systematic approach, and not systemic, a systematic approach to figuring out where the violators should and should not be in their propensity to recommit or reoffend? And those that may not have a high propensity to reoffend, may not have a high propensity to reoffend, we should probably let them back out because they've served their time and they're a tax burden right now, and we need to get them back to becoming contributing members of society, or at a very minimum, it's ridiculous you put someone in jail for 25 years for a cocaine possession, man. Maybe I'm wrong about that. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that President Trump's the one that did this. And I don't care if you say it was for votes. Sure, it might have been for votes. Granted, I will give you that argument. It was done. It's there. This is the weird world we're living in right now, man. Where Biden calls to not defund police, but frankly, technically speaking, across the board, I don't know who looks better for you. Who looks better for you when it comes to issues of criminal justice reform? And does any of that matter? Does any of that matter, man? Because I don't know who's leading this argument right now at all, anyways. I'll kick this back to Zig for a bit of a response if you want to, man. I would say real quick too, if you want to know, just a quick. I found a Twitter sort of it's like 10-part tweet there, something about talking about something that someone learned in law school. I don't know who this guy is, but he says he learned in law school about the social construction of crime. It was just a very, very interesting thread to bring up a separate sideline conversation, which I don't know if we have time for right now. He's saying he worked in a legal clinic of wage theft cases where employers were improperly paid, talking about that there's a social construction of crime. I suppose what he means is that crime is obviously directed more towards a lower socioeconomic status simply due to the fact that they are lower socioeconomic status. Nevertheless, Zig, I'll kick it to you, man. Do you think any of this matters in the presidential race?
One point then that I made yesterday, and one point that I'd like to make today is that the politics is often deeper than the rhetoric used to describe it. And I think in this case, when folks are saying defund the police, that is rhetoric that expresses a much deeper sentiment. And in fact, instead of being against these people, we could say, we don't necessarily want to defund the police, but we could have less police if we had healthier communities, if we had healthier inner city economies with less zoning laws, if we had less crime in a justice system that facilitates crime and incentivizes crime to some degree. So I actually think there's something much deeper behind that rhetoric. And I think we ought to be able to unite with those people and say, yeah, we don't necessarily want to defund the police per se, but we want to address your concerns by building healthy communities. I think that's a key takeaway for someone like me, at least.
And Shine, go ahead and pull up that video. It's in that Twitter link. You'll see, it's just, in my opinion, it's just bad messaging overall. It says, watch Minneapolis City Council president. Amy said in Facebook a second ago, by the way, she said she's not sure, but she says, I'm not sure I learned about a social construction of crime in law school. Maybe she missed that day. Matt said ownership only means what you can defend. Daniel said the Second Amendment doesn't actually protect your right to own guns. Only the willingness to use the guns protects that. Interesting. I didn't really follow that first, but the Second Amendment doesn't actually protect your right to own guns. Only the willingness to use guns protects that. That's actually a perfect way to segue into this clip here from Minneapolis. Okay. Yeah, go ahead and play that video then in its entirety. Start from the beginning.
We have a state action against our police department, which gives us legal mechanisms in the very short term. There's lessons from all over the country, all over the world that we're looking to take immediate steps while we work toward building the systems that we would need to imagine that future.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done. And so we have a state action against our police department, which gives us legal mechanisms
it repeats the video after that. It's Twitter on just a constant loop there. You understand what I'm saying?
Moron. Can I just say it? What a moron. That's not rational, reasonable thinking. That's weird. That's like 8-year-old girl stuff. I don't know. And I think the way we should look at government is when something is working for some people, which she admitted, and not working as well for other people, the solution is not scrub it all, and so that the people that it's working for don't get to use it anymore. It's make it work for everyone. That's the mission of America, is make the good stuff work for everybody and be an example in that regard. But it's not to scrub everything. Man,
and also just to speak up real quick, I think Camden, New Jersey, which people who are saying defund the police might point to as an example, they fired unionized police and replaced it with a lower paid, less unionized police force, and actually had better results in that case. So that might be what those people are calling for. But also, too, I think it's important, at least from my perspective, if that's what they want to do, and they have the legal political support to do it, go ahead. I don't live there. Go ahead and try it. I guess we can all see, and see if it does work. Perhaps they'll come up with a solution that does work. We don't necessarily know. And to think that we know what's going to happen probably isn't accurate.
I think it's going to be a weird way to express my opinion, but I think it would be a healthy thing for everyone to have, I don't know, in high school, some type of mandatory course that teaches logic training, or at least just a basic breakdown as to what simple logical fallacies are.
Critical thinking.
Yeah, man, critical thinking, okay? Because what we started the program with in this world where hypocrisies just do not exist, what ends up coming out of that sometimes, man, is like, I don't know, dude, false dichotomy? I think that's a lot of what's happening right now. Like it is a false dichotomy. There is a false, it's false to say that we can only have crazy martial law or no police at all. Like that is a wild assumption to make. It's asinine on its face, I believe. Nobody's ever operated that way. Any civilized society, I'm fairly certain, throughout human history, has not necessarily operated in sort of vacillating between one of these two extremes. And that's kind of where we are. Like last week, it was quasi martial law, and now in reaction to that, because the pendulum is just like crazy back and forth now, we vacillate from quasi martial law all the way back over to no police at all. It's outrageous. I think there's a much more constructive approach to take on this, man. I think there's a much more constructive approach to take, like we brought up yesterday when Justin Mosh brings up qualified immunity, when he brings up civil asset forfeiture, the war on drugs, overcriminalization, no-knock warrants, militarization of police, mandatory minimums. These are things that actually have quantifiable results. The end results, you can name it, you can point it, you can cite it, you can legislate towards it or against it or for it. Right? I don't know how healthy it is. Zig, I think you hit it on the head before, man. I don't know how healthy it is for us to constantly be considering, like, well, maybe we just need to get rid of police entirely, man. Because again, you heard her say it at the end. Frankly speaking, I think it's just bad messaging. And this is, again, Mr. Henry, giving people the benefit of the doubt too much. I think it's just bad messaging to some extent because, like, dude, okay, so let's go along this arguendo. For sake of the argument, let's go with what she's saying, that it's a sense of privilege that I can call the police and expect them to show up. In some sense, again, let's say arguendo. In some sense, I follow her. We all remember Dave Chappelle is one of my favorite stand-ups of all time. In my opinion, arguably one or two of all time. One or two of all time. A whole separate conversation as to who I would put above him. But Dave Chappelle has this skit, this stand-up thing where he's like, man, you know, I want to call the police from time to time. And man, every now and then I get in trouble too, and I need people to come check on me. He's like, but you know, I don't want to call them because I live in a nice house. He's like, it's not too nice, but it's nicer than what they think I'd live in. And he tells this story of police showing up to the house and thinking that he is actually the robber that he called, and police say, oh, he's still here, and he hits him. And he finishes the joke. The punchline of the joke is like, looks like this guy came up here and hung up pictures of his family all over the house. It's a funny joke. But what the satire is meant to draw attention to is a little bit of what this city council member was saying. There's always a little bit of sincerity to everybody's sarcasm. And I think what Chappelle was bringing up there in some small sense was essentially just this, that like, look, man, if I call the police, even live in a nicer neighborhood, unfortunately, just because the melanin in my skin, I may not get the same kind of reaction as you might get. That's a real conversation. It is. But if her response in the messaging sense is just something to the extent of like, well, I'm not going to answer your question of what do you do if you call the police and no one shows up? I'm not going to answer that question. I'm just going to basically distract, purely just dodge the entire thing by saying it's a sense of your privilege that you would even ask that question. Well, okay, so what am I meant to draw out of that? That you then have to admit that you basically just relinquished that part of the argument. Like you just said, okay, yeah, I will give it to you. The police are probably not going to show up. And if police probably don't show up, that means I'm meant to left to defending my own property. So now we're back to square one, where square one initially was we want to protect life. We don't want to call officers up here and indiscriminately just shoot at people for protection of property. But that's exactly where we are now, is it not? This is what I'm saying, y'all. If you will not have a nuanced conversation about this stuff, the end result is going to be the same. If I'm here defending my property with a gun, or if the police come back and respond to something with a gun, either way, it's likely that someone's life is going to be lost from it. Now, I don't know. Does it look better because it's police doing it as opposed to me protecting my property? For a lot of people, yeah, it does. It absolutely does. But for this city council member, it completely refutes the entirety of the reason why she brought this up in the first place. That we need to get a systemic type problems or something, man. So I can see where she's coming from. And frankly speaking, I empathize where she's coming from. I understand the notion behind what she's bringing up, but it doesn't help me figure that out because she's still operating in a very frustrating paradigm of two extremes. I think you hit it on the head, Zig, here, man. And I know we got to end the show, so I'll hit a couple more comments and I'll kick it to Zig, maybe Shine for some last one. Kelly said, yes, critical thinking 101. Daniel said cops are filling out police reports and writing citations for nonviolent crimes. Yeah, that's a major problem, right? In 2005, he says, Daniel says, 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the police did not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm. That ruling overturned a federal appeals court in Colorado that allowed a lawsuit to stand against a town when its police refused to protect a woman from her husband. Dan wanted to say, who do you call now? The police do not have an obligation to protect you. They just show up to fill out the paperwork. I think the point that Daniel's making is that like the proposed alternative solution of you just doing it for yourself is not that different from what the police are currently doing. I get that, but that's also a little bit of the point of this march right now is that it is substantially different when police show up because police have far greater legal allowance to do some of these things than an average citizen like you or I would do. That's the purpose of a police officer operating under the scope of his or her employment. That we don't hold them to the same legal standards that we would an average citizen, because on an average day in my life, it is highly unlikely that I will enter into a situation where I have to use lethal force or to enact some type of physical harm on another individual. Conversely, in the average day of a police officer's life, it is highly likely that that scenario will happen. So the legal justice system over thousands and thousands of years, I'm talking Greco-Roman time, I'm talking Code of Hammurabi. This is not new to America. For thousands of years, society has said, okay, so if we're specifically asking a certain industry to go out and enforce laws, if we're going to tell them every single day, you're going to be doing things that your average citizen should not and cannot do, we're probably not going to hold you to the same legal standard. That we might be anarchy at that point, right? Any more than I would ask Shine to go out there and do that and not hold him accountable for something. There's a trade-off there is the point that I'm making. That is the heart of what this conversation is right now. That's what the heart of the conversation should be right now. I'm rambling, man, and it's already 10:06. Zig, go ahead and respond if you want to, buddy.
Yeah, I just think that sometimes when we're looking at the news and thinking about other people's thoughts, we can very easily think maybe they just don't know what they're talking about and just dismiss it. I think somewhere in the Bible it says, "Forgive them, for they do not know." Okay, some of these people don't know, and if they don't know and they want to try something, hey, by all means, go for it. It's not my backyard. I don't necessarily have to care. I don't have to live with the consequences. Go for it. I give you the green light to go for it. You want to try and no police? Cool. Perhaps we can all be pleasantly surprised by a creative solution that they come up with. I think that that's still within the realm of possibility. But what I don't think should happen is that people should automatically say, well, I am better than them because I support police and they want to defund all police. And that's not necessarily a fair or equitable way of thinking about things. You might in that case you might not understand their perspective, and they might not be able to understand yours. In which case, it's just an act of ignorance. There shouldn't be any moral claims, which I think, like you mentioned, in terms of false dichotomies, it's very easy to fall into those kinds of traps.
Daniel just said cops are not more at risk than average citizen. Lots of studies show that. I meant risk in the legal sense. Risk being in the sense of, I think it would be a very objective statement to make that as a police officer, you risk not risking your physical life. What I'm saying is you risk legal liability in the sense that every single day, if my job dictates that I have to go out there and enact some type of physical restraint or respond in a physical manner to another individual, my job doesn't cause me to do that. In fact, if I did that in my job, not only would I be fired, I would be held liable for sure. It's not a part of my job within the scope of my employment to do that as my job. That's the part of the risk that I'm talking about, the risk of taking on legal liability. Kelly said they wouldn't need protection from us if they would just be honest. Absolutely. No, absolutely. And again, this is where I go to say, all I'm asking for at this point is just stop operating in the world of the two extremes. Let's have a concise, not concise, but a qualified conversation about some of the things that we should and could be changing. And I'm afraid about operating in these worlds of two extremes, man, where Democrats are calling right now for ending police, entirely, and at the same time not supporting Second Amendment. Again, man, I've been in this world for a very long time. I'm saying qualified immunity, civil asset forfeiture, the drug war, overcriminalization, no-knock warrants, militarization of police, mandatory minimums. Let's start there. Let's at least start there. That's the best way to put it. I would like that to at least be the starting point. The starting point in my mind seems problematic if we're talking about just like get rid of the entire institution. I don't know, man.
Well, and the other point that I want to make real quick is that it says very clearly in the Federalist Papers that the government should be regulating passions. Okay, the government should not be partnering with people to stir anyone up. This is explicitly clear in the Federalist. So anybody who riles people up through false dichotomies and urges people to do irrational things and say irrational things, they're not operating in accordance with founding principles. Clearly stated.
And I do want to get to one final story here that at least ends on. It's an odd way to say it, but at least ends on a note of holding people accountable. Before I do, though, man, let me make sure I give Sean a chance to chime in on some of this stuff too. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, if we're gonna throw in some anecdotal stuff like you did about the Dave Chappelle joke, not even like that's not even like based on a real story. He was telling a joke. He's a comedian. I have two anecdotal stories of where the police have protected me. I could give you 4 or 5 where I was maybe taken advantage of, but I have at least 2. Someone threatened to kill me at my job in 2008. They called me. They sent me text messages. They said they were going to kill me at my work the next day. I told my boss and I told the local, actually I'll even tell you where it is, the Oak Ridge Police. The Oak Ridge Police knew that there was a threat on my life and sat out in the parking lot and waited there all day. And I thought that was cool. Made me feel safer. And in fact, now this is not necessarily an average experience. It may be because I know people, but at the time I was 23. I was a nobody. I was a loser, just moved back to Oak Ridge from Atlanta, a failed musician. A police officer let me stay the night at his house that night in order to let me feel safer, theoretically even putting his own family in danger. Okay? I also used to date somebody whose boyfriend, her former boyfriend, beat her. And when I started dating her, he threatened to come to my house and hurt me and hurt her. Several times he was stalking around the house, and the Knoxville police came and just waited in the middle of the night and sat outside my house. There was one Knox County Sheriff's officer who used to just drive by during that time in the middle of the night, usually around 2 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, those are anecdotal. That doesn't mean that this is the case for every person or everybody. But I know, and this is me being vulnerable, in those times of my life, if there hadn't been that institution, I would have been far more afraid for my persons and effects. Okay? So those are anecdotal. I'm not even trying to prove any point. It's just we're hearing a lot of negative stories about community policing. And I just wanted to throw those things out there. And as far as what Zig said about being pulled into ideological traps and letting people try stuff, I posted an article yesterday from Wikipedia about a time where Canadian police took 16 hours off. 16 hours. That's it. They went on strike for 16 hours. And they almost burned Montreal to the ground. Several banks were robbed. Many people were killed. Many buildings were lit on fire. So we do have evidence of what happens when police stop policing. And everyone knows it. Okay? We do have some, at least, anecdotal evidence. And the other thing is, I really don't believe that this woman that we saw on CNN is having a good faith argument. I think there's enough evidence for what's going on where certain ideologies are being elevating to the exclusion of others. She's not having a good faith argument about what she believes. That's not what's happening. I believe she would say anything. She would lie, cheat, or steal to get done what she believes to get done because it's a religious sacrament for her. It is not a political ideology where she's trying to do what's best for her community. She is trying to serve her new God. And that's my opinion. So it's not like a regular political discussion where people are trying to figure out what's best for a community. She's trying to like take communion or something like that, get baptized. It's a sacrament for her to get this done, not an ideology. So I don't think it's good faith. So I don't address people with good faith who I don't think are dealing in good faith. So, and I feel like to do so is a great way to be taken advantage of. And here's the other thing. The riots started in Minneapolis and then spread to the rest of the country. What I'm worried about is any of these solutions will start in Minneapolis and then spread to the rest of the country, just like the riots did. Now, a lot of those things are anecdotal, kind of a stretch, but I felt like they needed to be said as a matter of balance so we can have like the full spectrum conversation and really deal like, who wants to be the guy right now saying, here's some nice things police did for me? Not me.
Right. No,
but I really care about this show. I really care about being fair. And if we're going to throw out anecdotal stories from Dave Chappelle of things that didn't even really happen, even though I bet things like that have happened, I might as well throw in some anecdotal stories where people, not police, people chose to do their civic duty and protect me. And I'm so glad they did, and protect my fiance. And I'm so glad they did. But that's all I'll say about that, and I appreciate the time, Grant.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I honestly, I think we need to see some more headlines of not just police getting it right, but a massive sort of rechange, rethought, refocus on faith in the institutions. Check out this next headline here. We'll end the show with this. It seems slightly off topic, but I promise you it's not. It's a Fox News headline. Barr confirms the DOJ wants Prince Andrew to provide, quote, some evidence in the Epstein investigation. I mean, there's story after story after story of how we've lost faith from the top down at an institutional level in law enforcement, law investigations, the FBI and the CIA sort of working in cooperation, working in tandem to say influence, rig, and or throw the election to Hillary Clinton's favor. Maybe that's my personal opinion. Maybe it's not, but it seems like there's pretty irrefutable evidence right now that that attempt did happen, that it went on. I mean, goodness gracious, man. We certainly don't have time at the end of the show to go over all that. But at the top-down level, I mean, okay, fine. Don't go one way with it. Go the other way with it. If you want to say that it's President Trump got off a multitude of investigations, that he haven't been pursued properly for violation of the 25th Amendment, the Emoluments Clause, that he hasn't been pursued properly for, I don't know, the obstruction of justice stuff that happened before. It doesn't matter. The point I'm making is that it seems like both people on both sides now have this sense that they've lost faith in the institutions. And I think that's a little bit of what Shine says there too, is like, look, bro, I mean, in the way that Zig was talking before, at a localized level, is that really what's happening to y'all? At a localized level, is this really your interaction with officers as well? On a day-to-day basis, where does your faith with institutions stay? This is one of these stories that could help that. Jeffrey Epstein, did he kill himself? I don't know. Did he not kill himself? But Attorney General William Barr told Fox News' Brett Baier in an exclusive interview on Monday that the Justice Department is seeking to speak with Prince Andrew in connection with criminal investigation into disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, who died last year. I would posit in there, died suspiciously last year, but that's just my take. Well, Barr said that there was no truth to reports that the UK would extradite the royal to the US. He did say that the DOJ wanted to speak with the Duke of York to provide some evidence. Quote, he says, I don't think it's a question of handing him over. I think it's just a question of having him provide some evidence. But beyond that, I'm not going to comment. Like when a guy like Jeffrey Epstein, man, when he kills himself, which is the official story, people are left with questions. They want to know. I mean, the entire country, for a very short 72-hour period, there was actual legislation. Dude, Alexander Cortez was on the same page as Republicans for a very short 3-day period about this very issue of what happened to Jeffrey Epstein and all the children. We haven't heard anything from that right now. We need more stories to restore faith in our institutions, and we need a better way to be able to look at this at a localized level to say, like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe I'm focusing too much on the squeaky wheels. Maybe I'm focusing too much on the media spin, on the media narrative. Maybe I'm focusing on too much on stuff that is not reality. Hey, my name's Mr. Henry, by the way. For Zig and my buddy David Sean Thompson over there, we'll be signing off this morning. We're a little bit late this morning. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. It's a good show, though. We had it going. We'll sign off for this morning. See y'all very soon. See you tomorrow. Love all y'all.